To celebrate spooky season, I decided to attempt a hardcore Nuzlocke of Pokémon Emerald using only Dark-type Pokémon. I'm sure you're wondering why I didn't do this challenge with Ghost-type Pokémon, and I can assure you, I have a perfectly good explanation for that. It's that I forgot to nickname the Pokémon in the Ghost-type Nuzlocke I was working on with spooky names, because, well, I'm an idiot. Fortunately, the Dark-type is a fine substitute. There won't be any nicknaming issues in this run. As always, a full list of the rules will be in the description down below. But in short, I can only use Dark-type Pokémon in battle, I can't use items in battle, and I can't overlevel my Pokémon. Let's get started. Like most horror movies, our story begins with a family moving into a new house in a small, seemingly peaceful town. I leave the house in order to venture off into the woods alone when I'm stopped by a young girl who tells me that there's a scary Pokémon up ahead. Like most people in slasher films, I head right towards the danger for absolutely no reason. It turns out to just be a jump scare though, as it's just Professor Birch being chased by a raccoon. After saving him from being turned into a werewolf, or werzagoon, he gives me a Pokedex and May gives me some Pokeballs so I can go catch my actual starter Pokemon, a Poochyena. I name him Cujo, which I spelled incorrectly in spite of having seen the film. Don't worry though, I'm sure I'll notice this mistake and correct it at some point. Surprisingly, there's another Dark-type Pokemon up ahead. With a 1% encounter rate, I eventually find a Seedot after some serious cardio. But thanks to rule number 1, I was prepared for this scenario. I catch her and I name her Audrey too. Currently she's only a Grass type, but eventually she'll evolve into a more evil Grass type. The scariest part of this entire run is when my dad asks me to hang out with Wally. I make it out of the woods and I make it to Rustboro City. Thankfully, before the level cap of 15, Cujo is able to learn the move Bite, which is a special attack in Gen 3 and gives us a chance to defeat Roxanne and a Rock-type Pokemon. Evolving Audrey 2 and bringing her to this battle also might have helped, but considering I can't even spell the name of my dog correctly, it shouldn't come as a surprise that I made the mistake of not doing that. Because Cujo has an impish nature, his bites don't quite do enough damage, although he does get a flinch on the first one. The second one manages to get a crit and knock out the first Geodude, so we're off to a pretty good start. Her second Geodude comes in and Bite does over half after leveling up, but Cujo gets hit with a Rock Tomb which lowers his speed. He still outspeeds and knocks out the Geodude on the following turn, then she sends in her Nose Pass. Because of the speed drop, her Nose Pass now outspeeds and goes for Harden, and our Bite does very little damage. Not being able to outspeed doesn't give us a chance to get flinches with Bite, so I swap to Sand Attack in hopes of getting through the battle with luck instead of skill. Eventually we both start hitting each other with bites and tackles, activating our Oran Berries. Cujo gets a crit, but that just leads her to using a potion and she eventually lands a Rock Tomb and ends attempt number 1. A new attempt is a chance to start fresh, and learn from all the mistakes I made in attempt 1. Never mind. At least Cujo 2 has a neutral nature instead of a minus special attack nature, which should help quite a bit. It will hopefully help him forgive me for misspelling his name again. I make it back to Roxanne and, still didn't learn from my mistakes. If you want to try this run for yourself, please evolve your Seedot and teach it the TM for Bullet Seed. This time around, Bite does well over half, as I also managed to EV train Cujo 2 a little bit. He does get hit with a Rock Tomb, but gets the KO on the following turn. The second Geodude comes in and flinches, so Cujo 2 is able to avoid taking any damage before knocking it out. Nosepass comes in and once again outspeeds due to Rock Tomb and goes for Harden again. This time I start going for Sand Attack right away, then she goes for Block so I can't switch, which would matter if I were smart enough to have brought a second Pokemon with me. Cujo 2 manages to get off 6 Sand Attacks without taking damage from the only tackle she used in between all of her Hardens. She misses another tackle and Bite does a little more damage than last time. Eventually she hits a tackle, and after a few more bites, Roxanne uses a potion. I bring her low once again and she uses yet another potion, but fortunately she hasn't landed an attack, so Cujo 2 is still at 20 HP. She finally hits another tackle which activates our Oran Berry, then misses one last tackle and Cujo 2 is able to get the KO. I knew it was possible to do this with just a Poochyena, but not evolving Audrey 2 and bringing them along was the third dumbest thing I've done in this run, right behind misspelling Cujo twice. I run into the boat captain from I Know What You Did Last Summer, and after saving his Wingull, he sails me over to Dewford Town. In the Granite Cave, I have another encounter, a Sableye that I catch and I name Ryuk. Now that it's way too late to matter, I get Audrey 2 out of the box and evolve him into a Nuzleaf, and now he can join the team. I also evolve Cujo 2 into a Mightyena, although I'm not sure how much they'll help against the fighting type gym. Thankfully they won't have to find out, because Brawly doesn't have a single move that can even hit Ryuk. Sableye might not be the best Pokemon, but the dark ghost typing certainly helps out a lot here. Without Ryuk, I don't think it would be possible to get past Brawly. I head over to Slateport and run into some sort of cult. Then I continue on and run into May, who challenges me to a battle. I set up a Howl with Cujo 2, who then misses a tackle on the following turn. Eventually he takes out Wingull and she sends in Combuskin. I swap to Ryuk as she goes for a Focus Energy, then he gets hit with Ember and retaliates with a Nightshade. We run it back for another turn, but thanks to Ryuk's Oran Berry, he can survive a third Ember, although he does get burned. He knocks out Combuskin with a Nightshade and then survives at just 7 HP after the burn damage. So I swap into Audrey 2 against Lombre and he gets hit with a Nature Power which turns into Swift. Audrey 2 hits a Fake Out for some chip damage, then gives Lombre a taste of her own medicine with a Nature Power of his own. He gets hit with a Growl, so it takes 2 more hits from Nature Power to knock out Lombre and defeat May. After defeating May, I make it to Mauville where I run into Wally, who thinks sending out a Ralts versus my Dark-type Pokemon will prove to his uncle that he's ready to take on the gym leader. Wally is definitely not ready to take on Watson, but I'm not so sure we are either. I don't have a great answer for his team. His Magneton and Manectric are going to be particularly difficult to deal with. I lead with Audrey 2 against Voltorb and hit a Fake Out for some chip damage. Then I swap into Ryuk hoping for a self-destruct, but he goes for Spark. Ryuk hits a Fake Out as well, then gets hit with another Spark before getting the KO with Nightshade. Ryuk levels up and learns Detect. Then Electrike comes in, so I swap into Kujo 2 and Electrike goes for Howl. In order to take out Magneton, I'm going to need to set up Howls myself, so I have to hope Electrike also decides to spam Howl for as many turns as possible. He goes for Leer on the first turn instead, but then switches to Howl as well. This goes on for quite a while. Here's a live action reenactment of the battle. Eventually Electrike switches to Shockwave after I've gotten off 5 Howls, so I swap to Bite but not before taking a Quick Attack as well. Bite does over half, then Electrike unfortunately hits another Quick Attack before going down to a second Bite. Magneton comes in and Kujo 2 lands a clutch critical hit from Rock Smash which takes it out in one hit. That was huge. Manectric comes in, so I swap into Audrey 2 who gets hit with a Shockwave. He hits a Fake Out, then gets hit with a Thunder Wave, but he isn't holding a Cherry Berry, or anything for that matter, because I taught him the move Thief to steal Manectric's Citrus Berry. He also happens to get a crit, which is nice. I decided to go for Bide now that Audrey 2 is holding the Citrus Berry, but he gets fully paralyzed after being hit with a Shockwave. I can't really switch into anyone here, so I stay in and Manectric starts going for Howls as we get fully paralyzed again. Audrey 2 finally gets off the Bide, but thanks to the Howls, he can't survive 2 hits from Quick Attack and he goes down. This allows for a clean switch into Ryuk who can get off another Fake Out. Then he survives a Shockwave at just 6 HP, and thanks to the crit from Thief, he's low enough to be taken out with a Nightshade. Audrey 2 may be gone, but his sacrifice will not be forgotten. I make my way to Meteor Falls where I run into yet another Colt, and I decide to be a hero and climb to the top of Mount Chimney to stop them. Maxie's team is no joke though, especially since I only have 2 Pokemon. I send in Ryuk versus Mightyena to take the Intimidate and hit a Fake Out. Then I swap to Kujo 2 who gets hit with a Sand Attack. I decide not to mess around with the accuracy drop, so I swap back into Ryuk who gets hit with a Bite. Then he hits a critical hit Fake Out. I swap back again and this time he goes for Bite, which doesn't do much. I go for Rock Smash hoping for a defense drop and get one. But a second Rock Smash still just misses the KO, although it does get the second defense drop. Then Kujo 2 gets hit with a Sand Attack. Maxie uses a Super Potion, but Rock Smash is starting to do decent damage, and Kujo 2 takes down the Imposter. Zubat comes in, so I swap back into Ryuk who gets hit with a Supersonic, which forces yet another switch back into Kujo 2 who gets hit with a Wing Attack. 2 hits from Bite take out Zubat while Kujo 2 got hit with another Wing Attack. Then he sends in his Camerupt. Bite does about a quarter of his HP but gets a flinch. A second Bite takes him below half and then gets another flinch. That's pretty lucky. I consider switching here because a third Bite will put him into heal range, but I decide to stay in and get yet another flinch. That has never happened to me before, and will probably never happen again. This time around I do switch back into Ryuk as he goes for a Super Potion, then hit a Fake Out. Nightshade does decent damage, then Camerupt hits a Magnitude 7 which activates Ryuk's Oran Berry. One more Nightshade takes out the Camerupt, and for now, the Colt leader will have to wait until the sequel to get his revenge. Maxie was just the warm-up though, because now I've got to deal with Flannery. Her team is pretty intimidating, especially her Torkoal. I send in Kujo 2 to get an Intimidate off on the Numel, then swap back to Ryuk who gets hit with an Overheat. I was really hoping for a Magnitude there. I swap back into Kujo 2 and then Flannery sets up a Sunny Day, which is pretty terrifying. Thankfully her Numel's attack and special attack are lowered by quite a bit, which means her takedown doesn't do much damage. This means I can set up some Howls which will also help stall out the Sunlight. After 4 Howls the Sunlight fades, then she sets up another Sunny Day. Now Kujo 2 is at +6 attack, and I decide to risk going for Dig since Numel is at -4 attack, and has been going for takedown exclusively. But she decides to switch to Magnitude, which thankfully doesn't do much damage. Dig obviously does enough to get the KO. From here, Kujo 2 is able to sweep through the rest of her team with Dig, including her Torkoal with its massive defense. If anything went wrong while trying to set up those Howls, this would have been a wipe for sure. Once I exit the gym, May attempts to pull off a jump scare, but I'm unfazed by it. The real horror comes from having to face my father to get the next gym badge while still having just 2 Pokemon. Thankfully, Ryuk's Ghost typing really helps out against his normal type attacks. After a fake out, he hits a feint attack, then gets confused by Teeter Dance, so I swap into Cujo 2, who also gets hit with the Teeter Dance. Really, Dad? Going for 2 in a row? You should know better. I swap back into Ryuk and he went for a Facade, which obviously doesn't affect us. Then another fake out puts him into Hyper Potion range. 2 more feint attacks bring Spinda to the red and then he hits another Teeter Dance, so there's yet another switch into Cujo 2. Cujo 2 comes in and this man once again goes for Teeter Dance twice in a row. We rinse and repeat with the Facade on the switch to Ryuk and then he finally gets the KO with a fake out. He sends in Vigoroth who outspeeds and hits an Encore. Well played, Dad. I switch to Cujo 2 who laughs off a feint attack, then back into Ryuk on a Facade. This allows for another fake out, but obviously results in another Encore as well. That's okay though, as Cujo 2 gets to hit another Intimidate. Another switch back into Ryuk on a Facade and this time I go for feint attack, which prompts him to do the same. Ours hurts a lot more though, and a second is able to get the KO. In comes the king himself, but Ryuk has Detect so he can avoid taking damage on the non-loafing turns and then hit a feint attack when he's loafing around. It doesn't exactly do a lot of damage though, and he only has 5 detects. After activating his Citrus Berry and taking him below half, I switch to Cujo 2 to get off an Intimidate, and then he gets hit with a Yawn. I switch back on the loafing turn and hit a fake out so he can't attack. After hitting a feint attack, I switch back into Cujo 2 who tanks a feint attack, then hits a Rock Smash to lower Slacking's defense. I swap back into Ryuk on the heal and then hit another fake out. After quite a bit more of this switching and chipping away at his Slacking, Cujo 2 eventually gets a crit with a Rock Smash and takes it down. Linoon is his last Pokemon, and while it would normally be terrifying if it gets off a belly drum, it only has normal type attacking moves, so it can't hit Ryuk. Ryuk writes Linoon's name in his death note and earns us the 5th badge. Now that the 5th gym is defeated, the level cap is increased to 33, which really isn't much, but it does allow me to evolve Cacnea into a Cacturn. I decided to put off catching one until after the gym because I couldn't use it anyway, so I head back to the desert and catch one and name her Pazuzu. That's not all though, as now I have access to Surf. That means I can get the Good Rod from this fisherman and fish up a Carvana that I catch and I name Jaws. I can also head back to Route 117 and fish up a Corphish that I catch and I name Ghostface, although he won't get the Dark type until he evolves either. Still, it's nice having more than 2 team members for the first time in a while. We miss you, Audrey, too. On the way to Fort Tree City, I'm able to evolve both Jaws and Pazuzu before the fight with May. Jaws is able to take out Pelipper with a few crunches after it stops wasting everyone's time with Protect. Combuskin comes in, but a rain-boosted Surf takes out her fighting chicken. Lombre gets in a couple of weak hits as well, but goes down to a couple of crunches. May isn't scary anymore. Just past Fort Tree City, we have another encounter in Absol. It feels like Christmas came early with all these new team members. I catch him and I name him Chucky. With the EXP share equipped, I'm also able to evolve Ghostface into a Crawdaunt, so he too now has his Dark typing. The team is looking pretty strong just in time for Winona. Before taking her on, I make a trip to the abandoned ship to get the TM for Ice Beam, then head back to Fort Tree City to battle her. With Ice Beam, Jaws is able to one-hit KO her Swablu and her Tropius. She sends in Pelipper who also loves to use Protect. Jaws hits a Crunch which does over half and then gets a special defense drop, then gets hit with an Aerial Ace. A second Crunch gets the KO, then she sends in Skarmory. Surf does over half, but she hits pretty hard with an Aerial Ace. A second Surf gets the KO, then her Altaria comes in. But there won't be any Dragon Dancing shenanigans from you today, Winona, as an Ice Beam is able to get the KO in one hit. That was pretty easy. Her effort was about as bad as the effort behind the movie Birdemic. Over in Lily Cove, I defeat May one last time in an anticlimactic battle. At least Archie is on board with the spooky season theme, as he's at the top of Mount Pyre surrounded by the fog. Team Magma tries to get in on the fun, but their hideout is on the side of a volcano. Dante's Peak doesn't qualify as a horror film. Do better, Maxie. I make it through the hideout so I can confront him about it, but maybe I owe him an apology because he's waking Groudon. Clearly he's a fan of creature features. He doesn't appreciate my misunderstanding of his motives, so he challenges me to a battle. Jaws just misses a KO with Surf, then gets hit with a Scary Face. So I swap into Ryuk as he goes for a Super Potion. He hits a Fake Out, then he gets hit with Swagger, but breaks through and hits a Confuse Ray. He breaks through again and hits a Nightshade, then Mightyena hurts itself in confusion. Ryuk is too smart and breaks through the confusion again for the KO. He sends in Crobat, so I swap into Cujo 2 for the Intimidate, then into Ghostface on a Wing Attack. He gets hit with Confuse Ray but breaks through and hits a critical hit from Rock Tomb. Maxie uses another Super Potion and Crobat survives a Surf at like 1 HP. But Ghostface is a killer and breaks through confusion again and gets the KO. Camerupt comes in and Ghostface snaps out of confusion and gets the KO with Surf. Maxie then runs off, but like most slasher villains, I'm sure we'll be seeing him again. I attempt to chase around Team Aqua, but they run away from me, so I head over to Moss Deep City and get ready to take on the Psychic type gym. Usually Tate and Liza are pretty difficult, but having a team full of Dark type Pokemon certainly gives us the edge here. If I lose, I'll have to play with them forever and ever and ever. I send in Jaws and Chucky against their Xatu and Claydol. Jaws hits a Surf that does just under half to Claydol, but crits Xatu and does over half. Chucky then finishes off Claydol with a Shadow Ball so it can't hit us with Earthquakes. Xatu uses a Calm Mind, but its only attacking move is Psychic, so it's not a threat. A Surf takes it low, and then a Shadow Ball finishes off Solrock. Lunatone comes in, and Xatu does manage to hit a Confuse Ray on Chucky, so I swap into Pazuzu as Tate and Lize heal Xatu. Neither Lunatone nor Xatu know an attacking move other than Psychic, so eventually we're able to take them both out and earn our 7th badge. With the Grady twins defeated, I head over to the Space Center expecting to fight some Xenomorphs, but instead all I find is Team Magma. Steven and I easily take care of them. Then I begin my descent in search of Team Aqua. I find the hideout, and I also find the TM for Earthquake, which will come in handy. I stumble upon Kyogre as Archie shows up and decides to embarrass himself in battle. After losing, he doubles down on making poor choices by using the wrong orb on Kyogre, which leads to catastrophic flooding. Excellent work, fellas. In order to save the world, I have to go find Rayquaza, who sits at the top of the spear pillar. Parts of the footage were lost during the journey, so here's an artist's rendition of what went down. With the world now saved, it's time to face the 8th and final gym. Juan's team can be a bit tricky depending on which Pokemon you have, but if you've seen one of my other Emerald runs using only physical type moves, you would know what strategy I'm about to go with here. Chucky can learn the move Substitute and outspeed Love Disc. It shouldn't be surprising that Chucky can turn himself into a doll. Thanks to Love Disc's weak stats, Chucky can sustain 2 hits from Water Pulse before his Substitute even breaks, which allows him to get off 3 Swords Dances, then sweep through Juan's entire team with Return. I make it to Victory Road where Wally shows up and challenges me to a battle, but he doesn't put up much of a fight. I make it through and get to the Elite Four. Let's take a look at the team. I feel like we've got some pretty solid type coverage, although we're seriously lacking some bulk. This should be a fun challenge. First up for the Elite Four is Sydney, a fellow Darkness enthusiast. I lead with Jaws, who's able to get a one-hit KO with Surf on his Mightyena. This baits out his Cack turn, so I swap into my own. Unlike his though, Pazuzu knows 4x super effective Pin Missile specifically for this battle. Unfortunately, it only hits twice, which leaves Cacturne in the red. Pazuzu had her speed drop from a Cotton Spore, and after Sydney heals, Pazuzu once again only gets 2 hits from Pin Missile. She still manages to outspeed in spite of the speed drop and finishes it off on the following turn. Absol comes in, so I swap into Ghostface on the Aerial Ace. Then he outspeeds and gets a KO with Brick Break. Shiftry comes in, but it doesn't know any grass type moves. In fact, it doesn't have any moves that can damage Ghostface, aside from Swagger, which confuses Ghostface but doesn't phase him as he breaks through with a Brick Break for the KO. Once again copying my style, he sends in a Crawdon of his own, so I swap into Pazuzu. He goes for a Swords Dance, but it won't matter, as Pazuzu is able to get a KO with Giga Drain, which gets a crit just to send a message to Sydney that there's only room for one Dark-type trainer in this region. Up second is Phoebe and her Ghost types. Considering I have a team full of Dark-type Pokemon, this should be the easiest member of the Elite Four. That turns out to be true, as her Dusclops loves to go for status moves that allows Chucky to get off a Substitute. With his massive attack that's made even higher from me being able to EV train him properly, he doesn't even need a Swords Dance to KO Dusclops and Banette with a Shadow Ball. He does need one for Sableye though, so I set one up and eventually connect after she spammed some double teams and sweep through the rest of her team with ease. Substitute plus Swords Dance is a bit unfair, but I spent most of the early game with just a Mightyena and a Sableye, so I've earned myself a little break. Up third is the Ice-type trainer, Glacia. I lead with Ghostface, who sets up a Swords Dance as she goes for Hail. He then outspeeds and gets a KO with Brick Break. Her second Celio suffers twice as bad of a fate as her first, as it goes down to a critical hit. Her Glalie comes in and it outspeeds and hits an Ice Beam before going down to a Brick Break as well. She sends in her Walrein, and with Ghostface at level 53 instead of up to the level cap of 55, she goes for a Sheer Cold, but thankfully it misses. I thought it might be too easy to get through the early Elite Four members at the level cap, but maybe I should have been at level 54 just to be safe because that was terrifying. Her Walrein lives at a sliver and she heals as I go for another Swords Dance to guarantee the KO on the next turn. She misses yet another Sheer Cold and then goes down to a Brick Break. That could have been a real tragedy. Her lower level Glalie comes in and goes down to one last Brick Break as well. Crawdaunt is a bit of a beast. Last of the Elite Four is Drake and his Dragon types. I lead with Jaws vs Shelgon, and he's able to get the KO with Ice Beam. He sends in Altaria, who obviously suffers the same fate. Drake then learns from his mistake and sends in Kingdra, so I swap into Ryuk as he goes for a Dragon Dance. That's not great. Ryuk gets a crit with Fake Out, which is nice. Then I swap into Kujo 2 as he goes for another Dragon Dance. Then he goes for a third Dragon Dance on the following turn, but I've taught Kujo 2 Roar specifically for this moment, and it brings in Flygon. I swap into Ghostface, who gets hit with an Earthquake, but he can tank 2 non-critical hits from it and survives at just 18 HP before getting the KO with Ice Beam. Kingdra comes back in, so I swap into Pazuzu on a Surf. I decide to go for Leech Seed as he sets up Dragon Dance again. Then a second Dragon Dance on the following turn as Pazuzu hits a Giga Drain to heal to full. I know he's going to full restore here, so I offset his attack boost with Kujo 2's Intimidate. He goes for another Dragon Dance and Kujo 2 hits a Crunch, which combined with Leech Seed brings him to below half. I swap to Ryuk, who gets nailed with a Surf but heals some of it back from Leech Seed, then hits a Fake Out. Kingdra is low again, so I swap back into Kujo 2 for another Intimidate on the heel turn. He then gets hit with a Smoke Screen and misses, so I switch back into Pazuzu and he goes for yet another Dragon Dance. He finally switches to Body Slam, which takes Pazuzu pretty low, but a Giga Drain and a Leech Seed heal her back to about half. I swap into Ryuk on another Body Slam, then the combination of Leech Seed and Fake Out take down Kingdra. Was all of that switching necessary? Probably not. But did it keep me safe? Absolutely. Salamence comes in, so I swap into Jaws, who gets taken to just 34 HP with the Dragon Claw, but Jaws is able to outspeed and get a KO with Ice Beam, which also happens to crit. With Drake defeated, there's only one thing standing in our way, the champion Wallace. I would love to set up a Swords Dance sweep with Chucky, but I can't do that versus Wailord. So I lead with Ghostface and go for a Swords Dance, but he unfortunately goes for Rain Dance, which will be a problem when Ludicolo comes in. A Brick Break does about half, and then he gets hit with a Double Edge. Then he takes out Wailord with the second Brick Break. Ludicolo comes in, so I swap into Pazuzu on the Giga Drain. It outspeeds thanks to the rain and goes for a double team, but I've taught Pazuzu Sandstorm. She also knows Feint Attack, which can't miss, so his double teams are worthless. He swaps to Surf, which takes Pazuzu to about half, then another Surf takes her low, but the combination of Feint Attack and Sandstorm damage are enough to take down Ludicolo. Milotic comes in, so I swap to Ghostface, who gets hit with a Surf as the Sandstorm subsides. He can survive another Surf, and he does at just 2 HP before getting off a rest, which he wakes up from thanks to a held Chesto Berry. Then he gets hit with a Toxic, which is really unfortunate as I set up a Swords Dance. I go for Brick Break, which activates his Citrus Berry. A Surf takes Ghostface to just 31 HP, but a second Brick Break gets the KO. Tentacruel comes in and Ghostface hangs on at just 4 HP after the poison damage. I should sacrifice him here, but with some of the bigger threats out of the way and most of the team in good health, I decide to switch to Jaws instead, who gets nailed with the Sludge Bomb. He outspeeds and hits an Earthquake, but Tentacruel survives in the red and knocks out Jaws with another Sludge Bomb. That was a mistake. I guess I can make the case that Ghostface is more useful than Jaws at this point, but I probably should have just made the sacrifice. I send in Chucky, who's able to get off a Swords Dance as Wallace uses a full restore, then a substitute on the following turn as Tentacruel misses a Hydro Pump. This allows me to go for another Swords Dance before he breaks my substitute. Then I go for another one and he misses another Hydro Pump. That's a bit lucky, although I was hoping he would go for Toxic on one of these turns. He finally does go for Toxic, which lets Chucky keep his substitute and be at +6 and get the KO with Return. Whiscash comes in and goes down to a return as well. The reason it was so important to get to either +6 or have the sub up is because of Gyarados and his Intimidate. Especially when I accidentally click Swords Dance, which lets Gyarados get off a Hyper Beam. Whoops. Ultimately, my idiotic mistake doesn't end up mattering though, as a return gets the KO, earning us the victory over the champion. It's a shame Jaws couldn't live to the end, but I'm sure he would be proud of us. With the death, there's an open spot on the team, and in the post-game in the Savari Zone, there's actually one more encounter, a Houndour. I catch her and I name her Annabelle. Her fire typing is going to come in handy versus the final battle of the run against Steven and his steel types. I put her to the test right away against his Skarmory and she gets the KO with a flamethrower. Claydol comes in, so I swap into Pazuzu. Claydol uses Reflect, then 2 Giga Drains get the KO after Pazuzu gets hit with a couple of Earthquakes. Armaldo comes in, so I swap into Kujo 2 for an Intimidate, then swap into Ghostface on an Ancient Power. A Surf then takes Armaldo to literally 1 HP, then gets hit with another Ancient Power, but thankfully no Omni Boost. Steven heals and I take the opportunity to go for a Swords Dance, then on the next turn Surf gets the range and gets the KO. Aggron comes in and even with its insane defense, a 4-time super effective Brick Break gets the KO. Cradily comes in and Ghostface outspeeds and gets another KO with Brick Break. I'm glad I kept you around, buddy. Metagross comes in and hits an Earthquake which takes Ghostface to 35 HP, and he hits a Surf which does less than half. Unfortunately this time around, I can't switch you out, pal. Ghostface gets hit with another Earthquake and gets taken out. Thank you for everything, my evil crustacean. Annabelle comes in, and after filling the void left by Jaws, she avenges our fallen friend with one final flamethrower for the KO. That was a lot of fun. I was a bit skeptical about the validity of this run with some of the limitations the Dark type had in earlier gens, but this team really came through for the second half of this challenge. If you liked the video, please consider, well, liking the video. If you want to see more content like this, make sure you subscribe to the channel as it really helps me out a lot. Happy spooky season, everyone. It's time for me to head out. Thanks for watching, and I'll smell you later.